Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, we're going to be looking at the career of Brook Lopez and why nobody wanted this guy in the summer of 2018, because he was a late free agency ad for the Bucks that summer and has now become a really integral part of this team. I'm going to be doing this for a couple of different players, so if you have ideas for who you want me to cover, then be sure to leave those down in the comment section below. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day. All right, so Lopez was the 10th pick back in the 2008 NBA draft, a draft class that's actually really stacked, by the way. When you go back and look at it, there's Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook, Kevin Love, Goran Dragic, Serge Ibaka, Danilo Gallinari, and Brook Lopez has the second most career points out of anybody in that draft class, behind only Westbrook. And he had a really nice career with the Nets. He did miss almost 2 full seasons due to injury, playing only 5 games in one and 17 in another, but he was someone that once he properly developed was going to give you between 18 to 20 points per game, scoring out of the post, not providing you much spacing on the outside. But back in the day in the NBA, he was a really nice post scorer, was going to provide some nice rim protection and okay rebounding as well. He was a really solid player for the Nets, and I certainly look back and remember him fondly as a player that was just productive on every night and brought it every night and always played hard. And he went through plenty of highs and lows with the franchise as well, whether it was when they were back in New Jersey or now with Brooklyn. He won 34 games in his rookie season, had a solid rookie year, and then the next year they went on to win just 12 games, and that was the team that got off to the worst start in NBA history. And then he was on the teams that were supposed to be this sudden super team with KG and Paul Pierce and Darren Williams and Brook Lopez and all these guys that they had brought in. And then that was the year that he got hurt and only played like 17 games, so that was a down for him. And then once he came back, everything went downhill and they didn't have any assets, didn't have any picks. KG and Pierce left, and suddenly he was again on some really bad Nets team. So certainly some highs and lows, and even the highs, he wasn't really around for the team that actually had a chance to do something, not necessarily special, but at least have some postseason success with Jason Kidd as the head coach and all those guys that they brought in. And by the end of his Nets career, he had a really nice 9-year stretch. Even though he missed almost 2 full seasons, he finished #1 in franchise history in both blocks and points. And again, as someone that I generally look back on fondly as a really good, solid player for the Nets that was kind of the cornerstone of those 9 seasons that he spent there. He was the one driving force, the one constant. But then it became clear that it was time for the team to move on, and it was time to go on to a different era of Nets basketball. So he was traded away to the Lakers along with the pick that became Kyle Kuzma in exchange for D'Angelo Russell and Timofey Mozgov. And for the Nets, it was a chance to take on salary in Mozgov in exchange for a player in D'Angelo Russell that certainly still had plenty of talent, was a top 2 pick very recently in terms of when the trade went down, and they wanted to just try and see if it would work after he'd had some difficulties with the Lakers. And for the Lakers, they wanted to get out from under the salary in Mozgov. They wanted to move on from Russell because of the difficulties that he was having. They were bringing in an expiring contract in Lopez and then a late first-round pick that, as I said, became Kyle Kuzma. And so Lopez ended up on a Lakers team that honestly just wasn't all that good. They had Isaiah Thomas and a young Lonzo and a young Kyle Kuzma and a young Brandon Ingram. It was Luke Walton's first year as head coach, and they weren't awful. They won, in the mid-30s in terms of games, but they just weren't all that good, right? And he certainly didn't have the same amount of responsibility offensively in terms of shots, and his minutes weren't there either compared to his last couple of years in Brooklyn or with the Nets in general. And honestly, at the time, you probably could have had an argument that he didn't really belong in an NBA rotation anymore, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why in a second, but he just looked a little bit out of place in the modern game, and at that point in his career, things weren't looking good, and he wasn't like a sought-after free agent in any way going into that summer of 2018. But the Bucks ended up bringing him in like on July 17th, 2018. He signed a contract 1 year, a little bit over $3 million. And that's, pretty significantly far into the free agent signing process. It's not like people were lining up to sign Brook Lopez. They kind of waited it out, and the Bucks were like, okay, we'll fill out our roster. We'll get a potential rotation big in Brook Lopez. It's not like they thought they were bringing in this hugely impactful player at the time, and nobody thought really much of him. So why was that? How can a guy that is now so impactful for the Bucks, and we'll get into all the things that he does for them now, how could he go from not really being anything of note in the summer of 2018 to now being such an impactful player for the Bucks? What did people think was wrong with Lopez? Well, as I said, he just didn't really fit the modern description of what people wanted out of a 5-man. He wasn't very quick. He wasn't very athletic. He wasn't an outstanding defender in pick and rolls, at least the way that pick and rolls are being played now. A lot of teams were trying to switch, or they're trying to be a little bit more aggressive in pick and rolls, and that just wasn't something that Lopez was good at because he was probably one of, if not the slowest players in the entire league. Not only that, but his offensive game didn't necessarily fit what teams wanted either. You could still mix in some post-ups on occasion, but most teams were going to more spacing and more three-point shooting, and although Lopez had started to experiment with that in his final season with the Nets as well as with his one season with the Lakers, it was never something that he looked entirely comfortable doing, and he was just kind of mixing into his game to try and be a little bit more useful, right? So on both sides of the ball, it just didn't really seem like it was going to be a great fit for him in the modern NBA. He had just turned 30 years old, and he was coming off of a Lakers team that simply wasn't very good. So it's not like teams were really excited about bringing him in. Didn't look like he was a great fit. It didn't look like the three-point shot thing was going to be anything crazy special, and teams were just skeptical, and rightly so. And so the Bucks looked at it and said, okay, he's probably not going to be a great defender, but let's bring him in and we'll try it out. He started to experiment with the three-point shot a little bit. He only took 31 through his first like 7 or 8 seasons in the entire league, and then in the last couple, like I said, with the Nets and then with the Lakers, he did start to shoot around 4 a game at like 34-35%. So they thought, okay, maybe there's something here. Maybe we can make it work on defense and he can provide some spacing. And now, like I said, he's probably one of the most important players on their roster. And so we start last year, and there was a lot of hype around this guy because he was shooting pretty well from three-point range, and people weren't used to him, shooting the way that he was, and it was kind of an out-of-nowhere thing, right, for him to be such a nice spacing weapon for the Bucks. But it's not like he's a top 10 three-point shooter among his position or anything. He's a solid floor spacing big, but more so the impact for him has been felt defensively, and I don't really think that people talk about that as much because the Bucks have basically said, okay, we know that you're not good at really, jumping out on pick and rolls or switching, obviously, so you're just going to stay back in the paint and we'll deal with the ball handler, and if he gets to the rim, get rid of it, right? Like protect the rim. And that's something he was always pretty good at in Brooklyn. He'd had some seasons where he was better than others, but rim protection was something that he did provide, even though he wasn't a great athlete. He has good length. He's a big guy to protect the rim. And so that's what they started asking him to do, right? They said, space the floor, drop back on pick and rolls, protect the rim at all costs. And now he's an outstanding player for them. Like, he is so impactful because he allows them to play big on the defensive end while not having to play big on the offensive end because he can protect the rim defensively and space the floor offensively, which is huge with having Giannis there, because before Lopez got there, before either of the Lopez brothers got there, they kind of had to play Giannis at the 5 out of necessity at times, and they don't have to do that anymore. If they want to play Giannis at the 5 and go small and run up and down the floor, they can do that. But if they want to play bigger against certain teams, he can space the floor, he can defend well, and he can mix in some other things as well. Like, he has kind of a sneaky closeout game. It's not anything great, but when he's attacking a closeout, he can kind of lumber his way into the paint and kick it out, or maybe, get to the rim a little bit. Like, it's not anything crazy, but he does have that. You have to at least account for it. And if you want to go super small, he still has those post-up moves. He can still pummel you in the paint if he needs to, and that kind of versatility is something that really, really unlocks a lot of things for this Bucks team. So looking back on it in terms of why he didn't get signed, it's relatively obvious, and it made complete sense, and those teams weren't incorrect in their thinking. But this free agency signing specifically shows the importance of having a system and the importance of tailoring that system towards your players in terms of getting the most out of it. I don't think this is a situation where any team could have signed Brook Lopez and then he would have become this type of player for them. He's put in positions to be successful in Milwaukee as a floor spacer for Giannis, and then as a defender in terms of how they cover pick and rolls. If you're going to start asking Brook Lopez to trap ball screens and to switch, he's going to be an awful defender, right? And they realized that, and they said, okay, just go back there, protect the rim. And he has been put in tremendous positions to be successful. And I think that is the most important thing to take away from this free agent signing in terms of nobody wanting this guy to now being such an impactful player. It's about Coach Bud. It's about the Bucks system. It's about being a perfect place for him. And as a result, he signed a 4-year, $52 million contract this past offseason, despite being 31 years old now, and what you would maybe consider at times a more traditional big. And to this point in the season, his shooting numbers have not been maybe as great as you would have hoped from a percentage standpoint, but all the defensive stuff is still there. He's still really important for this team. And if they're going to make a run at a championship this year, you're going to be seeing a lot of Brook Lopez praise as we get closer to the playoffs and as we get into the postseason, because I think he's someone that with the way that they play can play in the postseason because of the way that they guard their pick and rolls and the way that he spaces the floor. Whereas you're going to see a lot of bigs in the playoffs potentially get pushed off the floor by smaller lineups. The Bucks can counter that with his post-ups if they want to, or they can bring him off the floor and they can just play Giannis at the 5. And that versatility on a night-to-night basis is part of the reason why they have such a great regular season record, as well as why they are going to be a true favorite once we get in the postseason to potentially make the NBA Finals. And yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. As I said in the beginning of the video, if you have other suggestions for players that you would like for me to cover in this series, I have a short list, but if you have others, leave those down in the comment section below and I will be sure to take a look. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will see you all next time.